You're listening to the weekly Parsha podcast, recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in Ramapit Shemesh Israel 5776, 2016. This week's Parsha is Parshas Beshalach. At the very beginning of the Parsha, we have the Jewish people making their way out of Egypt. I'd like to read you these verses at the very beginning. It says in chapter 13, verse 17, Vayhi Beshalach Parei Yisa'am. Pharaoh was sending out the nation. V'lo nocham Elokim derech eretz plishtim. God did not want to bring them directly into or through the land of the Philistines, Ki karevu, which was close. Ki amar Elokim pen yinachem ha'am b'roisem l'chama v'shavu Mitzrayma. God said that I don't want them to see any kind of wars. They'll want to return to Egypt. We're going to return to this verse in a moment because it's a very deep and interesting understanding of what this verse is referring to. But hold on to that for a moment. Instead, God took the Jewish people around Derech HaMidbar through the wilderness, Yamsuf, toward the Sea of Reeds, and the Jewish people left the land of Egypt. Mizarzin translates Unkelus. They were quick. They were going out quickly. Or Rashi alternatively says that they left fully armed. Now here's the verse which is difficult, challenging. The verse says like this: Vayikach Moshe es atzmos Yosef. Moses took the bones of Joseph, Imai, with him. Ki hashbeah hishbias bnei Yisrael lemor. Because Joseph had caused the sons of Israel, referring to his brothers, he had caused them to make an oath, saying, Pakod yifkad Elokim eschem. God will remember you, and he will redeem you. V'alisem es atzmosem yizeh itchem. And when God does, I want you to take my bones out of here with you. So as a result of the promise that Joseph asked his brothers to make to him, so Moshe Rabbeinu upheld that promise and made sure to find the bones of Joseph, take them out, so that they would go with the Jewish people. In fact, they were carried alongside the Jewish people throughout their 40 years in the wilderness, and eventually they were buried, as it says in Yehoshua, in Joshua. They were buried in Shechem, in what's today called Shechem. You can actually go there today it's actually kind of challenging to get there, but you can go there today and visit the grave of Joseph because his bones were carried all those years. And again, it was a result of this promise, this oath. Now, as we read this, so the thing that bothered me right away, that stuck out right away, is that the verses are out of order. The psukim are out of order. Because we see that it's already speaking about the fact that the Jewish people have left. They've already walked out. Hashem is not taking them directly into the Philistine lands, but he's taking them around, and they're about to get to Piachiros. They're about to have this whole interaction at Yamsuf, etc. But and then after Hashem has taken them out, it refers to the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu previously had already taken the bones of Joseph, and he had taken them out as per the request and the promise that the brothers had made so many years before. Why are these verses out of order? What's the significance of the fact that the Torah, at this moment, as they're leaving, after they've already left, the Torah tells us about something that happened previous to their leaving, which is Moshe taking the bones of Joseph to bring along. So that's the first question I'd like to ask. Another very interesting thing, which I mentioned we're going to come back to, which is the verse previous, two verses before this. So it says that Hashem did not want them to see milchama. Hashem did not want them to see a battle. So Hashem took them around. Took them a roundabout way. What's the battle? What was the battle that Hashem was concerned about? So the Medrash tells us that there was a specific issue that Hashem was concerned about. Lefishato shiftei shel Ephraim. There was a mistake that the progeny of Yosef himself, of Joseph, had made. The Shevet of Ephraim, the tribe of Ephraim, a number of years before, 30 years before to be precise, had made a mistake. They had made a cheshbon of when the 400 years would be up. And instead of counting 400 years from the birth of Isaac, they counted 400 years from the Bris Bein HaBasarim, from the covenant between the parts that God made with Avram Avinu. So they calculated that 30 years before was the time to leave Egypt. They walked out of Egypt, 300,000 members of the tribe of Ephraim were killed because they tried to leave early. Why did they get killed? They made a calculation based on when Abraham spoke to God and had this covenant between the parts. Like we said, there was a 30-year mistake. And they all, since they left too early, they were all killed, these 300,000 members of the tribe of Ephraim. In reference to this event, it says in Divrei Hayamim in Chronicles in 1 Chronicles chapter 7 verse 21 that they were killed. They were killed by the Anshe Gat. But that's the same shtuchim baderech chamarim, and their bones were spread out on the path in droves. It was 30 years before their brothers indeed would leave Egypt. So Hashem said, if the Jewish people will see the bones of these children of Ephraim spread out on the path, they'll be afraid. They'll see the Milchama, the war that occurred 30 years before, and they'll go back to Egypt. And that's why Hashem took them around. The Medrash is remarkable. There are a few points. One is, what obviously sticks out is the atzmos, the bones. Hashem was afraid that they would see the bones of the children of Ephraim. Very interesting, because we have here the atzmos Yosef, the bones of Joseph as well, that are being carried with the Jewish people. What's the significance of the concept of the bones, the atzmos? What is it? Why is it specifically also in reference to Joseph and Ephraim that we find the idea of the bones? What's the idea of that? Secondly, why is it specifically the children of Ephraim, the children of Yosef, who are the ones that make this mistake of trying to leave 30 years earlier? Why couldn't it have been a different tribe? Why wasn't it the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Dan? There's so many different tribes. Why was it specifically this tribe, the tribe of Ephraim? So I'd like to share with you another medrash that speaks about this idea, that speaks about this whole story with Moshe Rabbeinu Moses taking the bones of Joseph. And I'd like to ask a few more questions there, and we'll start to see that there's a theme running through all of these different ideas. It says like this, Vayikach Moshe es atzmos Yosef. Moses took the bones of Joseph. Olav HaKasuv Omer. About Moshe, the verse says in Proverbs chapter 10 verse 7, Chacham leiv yikach mitzvahs. The one who is wise of heart will grab onto mitzvahs, will grab commandments. What does that mean? Shekol Yisrael yasukim bekesav v'zav. The entire Jewish people at this point were involved in gathering the gold and the silver of the Egyptians. Right? The Torah tells us that as they were about to leave, they were asking for money from the Egyptians. The Egyptians were giving them all of their gold and silver. But what was Moshe doing at that exact moment? He was involved in finding the bones of Joseph. That's based on this verse. So Hashem says to Moshe, someone who's wise of heart, he's not grabbing money, he's grabbing mitzvahs. He's able to see something deeper. He's able to see that, what do I really want? What do I really want to leave Egypt with? I want to leave Egypt with the merit of fulfilling the promise that the brothers had made to take the bones of Joseph. Yosef hayachayev la'aviv. Very interesting. The Medrash tells us just to appreciate the greatness of what Moshe was doing at this moment. Is that Yosef, so he had an obligation to his father, to cover him, to bury him, because Yosef was the son of Yaakov. And you, Moshe Rabbeinu, are not the son or the grandson of Lebenoi. So it wasn't your obligation to be involved with him and to bury him. So Hashem says an amazing thing. Hashem promises Moshe, since you did this, I'm going to be involved with you and I'm going to personally bury you. The verse says that God himself, as it were, buries Moshe Rabbeinu. So the first thing that I want to point out here, it's not so much a question, it's just an interesting point which we're going to see ties in to the concept that we're going to talk about, is that Moshe Rabbeinu is someone who has the ability to see deeper. He has the ability to choose, instead of getting involved in money, he has the ability to choose to do a mitzvah, to do a commandment, to do something which has a deep spiritual value, and not to get stuck on the money, not to get stuck on the superficial things. That's a very important point. We'll see it connects into the other ideas that we're going to talk about. Now I'm going to skip a little bit in this medrash and share with you another piece. The medrash is addressing an important point, which is that Yosef was taken, his bones were taken out and traveled with the Jewish people for 40 years in the desert. And the question is, what was the merit? How did he have such a great merit, a zechus, that he would be able to indeed travel with the Jewish people and find his final resting place in the land of Israel? So, Amar LaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem said to Yosef, as it were, Ata amarta lachacha, you said to your brothers, Anochi achalkel eschem, that I am going to provide you with sustenance. Chayecha, I swear to you, Ata niftar, that when you die, I promise you that your bones will go around with the Jewish people, Bamidbar Arbaim Shana, in the wilderness for 40 years. So there's a promise. Since Yosef gave that guarantee that he's going to provide for his family, for the Jewish people. In reward, he would be there as it were. His bones would travel with the Jewish people in all of their glory, in all of the multitudes of the Jewish people that would exist so many years later. And here again, we want to understand, what is the idea? Where's the midah keneged midah? Whenever Hashem gives a reward, so it's always in a corresponding measure. What did Yosef do specifically? What's so special about what he did that he said that he's going to provide for them, that then allows him to be brought alongside the Jewish people for all those years in the Midbar, the wilderness? What is the concept? What is the depth of what the Medrash is trying to teach us in this point? The Medrash continues, Ki yashbeah hishbias b'nei Yisrael. He had caused the children of Israel to make an oath. Hashbeah hishbiah is a double language of an oath. Lama shnei pa'amim. The Medrash says, why is there this double language? Why does it say it twice? Amazing thing. He swore to them that he had nothing in his heart. He had no anger at them for what they had done. And they swore to him that they weren't upset for what he had done, for that whole entire travail, all of the difficulties that they had been brought through by Yosef with the brothers going back and forth, not knowing it was him, that they weren't upset at him for that either. So that's the double language of an oath. He's making an oath that he's not upset at them, and they're making an oath that they're not upset at him. And so there's two questions here that I want to ask. Number one is, indeed, how are they able to let go of that anger? He did something to them that was really upsetting, that was really hard, that was beyond challenging, that really drove them crazy in a certain sense. How are they able to forgive him for that? And on the flip side, how is Yosef able to forgive them for selling him into slavery, being ready to kill him? That whole interaction, how is he able to forgive them? That's question number one. Question number two is, why at this moment is he bringing that up? Why is he asking for forgiveness or mentioning his forgiveness at this exact moment when he's speaking about asking them to take his bones out? And what is the concept of an oath? What is the depth of a concept of an oath? Why is he making them swear? What's the idea behind it? Why is it integral? And what is the depth of the idea? There's one last piece in this medrash I want to share with one more question, and then we'll have one final question on the pasuk, on the verse itself, where we'll start to understand the theme that's going on here. Medrash says like this: what is the concept of this that Yosef requested of his brothers that they bring up his bones from here? Rabbi Levi says, what's this analogous to? To a man who had barrels of wine in his wine cellar. Thieves came, and they took the barrel. They went on their way, and then they drank up the wine, and they got rid of the wine. Now the owner of the wine finds the ganavim, finds the thieves, and he says, he says, okay, you drank up the wine. At least put back the empty barrels so I can have the barrels back. You're not using the barrels. The Medrash says, in the same way, the brothers had stolen Yosef, as it were. They had sold him into slavery in Shechem. Now, when Yosef is coming, his life is over. So he says to them, I want you, my brothers, I want you to swear to me. You stole me from Shechem. Swear to me that you will return my bones to Shechem, to that very place where you originally sold me. The Kach Nemar, that's why the verse says in Joshua chapter 24 verse 32, that the bones of Joseph, which they took, the sons of Israel took out of Egypt, were buried in Shechem. So in the same way, Yosef was saying, I want you to return me to that place that I was taken from. I was taken from Shechem. I want you to bring me back to Shechem. Now, if we take this at service value, if we take it for what it says, it seems very strange. I mean, how long was Yosef in Shechem? He was in Shechem for a few hours. He walked through Shechem. That's where he found his brothers. He found his brothers actually nearby in Dosan. But how long was he there for? What does it mean that he wants to be returned to Shechem? He wants to be buried in Shechem because that's where he was sold. What is the idea? It's very perplexing. What is the concept that this medrash is coming to teach us? So the answer to all these questions is hidden in two words. The next double language. There's two double languages in this verse. One is Hashbeah, which we just spoke about, the double oath. But Yosef also mentions that in the future, God is going to redeem you. God is going to remember you. And when he says that God is going to remember you, to redeem you, he says a double language, pakoid yifkoid. He will remember, he will remember. What is the idea of Pkida, of remembering, in the context of Geula, in the context of redemption? What is this aspect that Yosef is referring to of Hashem remembering? So we have this language elsewhere in reference to the concept of conception. The Gemara tells us in Rosh Hashanah that there were three women. It's a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, Daf Yud Aleph Amabez, page 11b. There were three women, Sarah, Rachel, and Chana. Sarah, Rachel, and Hannah. They were originally barren. They were unable to conceive. They couldn't have children. But Hashem remembered them on Rosh Hashanah, and they were able to conceive. So the idea of remembering, it says, Rosh Hashanah, Nifkeda, Rachel, Sarah, V'chana. It was on Rosh Hashanah that they were remembered, that they were able to conceive. So the Lashon, the language of Pkida, always refers to a remembering, a conception. It's an initial stage of redemption. The Gemara in Megillah speaks about the concept of this very concept, the concept of Pkida, speaking about there are 70 years between the first temple and the second temple. How do you make the cheshbon? How do you figure out exactly when the 70 years started? There's a whole discussion because Belshazzar, the king, thought it was a certain time that the 7 years were up. Achashverosh thought it was a different time, but actually they were all wrong. It was a much later time. They calculated from a certain point. The 70 years began at a certain year, but really it started from a different point, that the 70 years began from a different year, a later year. But interestingly, the Gemara speaks about the fact that the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, the return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel, the Beis HaMikdash, the rebuilding of the temple, started to occur already 18 years before the 70 years were actually up completely. So the Gemara says, how do you understand that? So the Gemara says there was a Pkida, there was a remembering that occurred 18 years before the completion, before the actual completion of the redemption, that the second Beis HaMikdash was actually to be rebuilt. There was a building that started, it stopped. The Jewish people returned, but they stopped returning. That occurred already 18 years before the 7 years were up. So there's a Pkida, there's a beginning, there's a remembering of Hashem, there's a conception, which is not complete. You only see it later. You only see it in retrospect, and that's going to be the key to what's going on here. You only see in retrospect that there was something that had happened much earlier, a conception. It's precisely parallel to the idea of conception. Conception of a child is something that occurs in private. It's something that nobody sees. It's something that even the parents can't see. You can't know that the mother has conceived until one does a pregnancy test. And when does everybody know that this woman has conceived? Really, only 9 months later do we know that this child, everything is okay, that as soon as the child is born, you know that 9 months earlier there was a conception. But conception is something that occurs in a hidden way and only really becomes revealed later. Yosef HaTzadik, Joseph, is the master of Pkida. He is actually the very one who, when it says that Rachel was remembered, he was the one who was conceived. So really, in his conception is this idea of Pkida. But Yosef is the one who is the first stage of Geula. He's the first stage. He's the one who brings the Jewish people down to Egypt in a certain sense. He's the one who sets the stage. He's there before anyone else. He's the conception of the Jewish people coming down to Egypt. So he's the first stage. He's always the first stage. And in the Geula process, in the process of Geula, we have two Mashiachim, we have two Messiahs. One is Mashiach ben Yosef. The Messiah comes from Joseph, who's the first stage. He's the one who brings it in a more natural way, where we don't see things openly, miraculously. And then later we have Mashiach ben David, who's from Judah, who all the things that occur around him are more miraculous and more open. But only really later does it become Nisgal Muslim afraid that we see retroactively that there was a conception, that there was a Yosef, that there was something that happened before. And sometimes even what happens at the beginning looks like the opposite. It looks like something gets worse. When Moshe Rabbeinu first comes, so Paro says, "Oh, they're lazy. Make the work harder for them." At the very beginning of Geula, of the process of redemption, things look worse. Things look harder. Things look like that's the end. It looks like there's no chance of redemption. Yosef HaTzadik, now let's look back at the questions that we asked. We're going to do them in reverse order. Yosef HaTzadik, he says to his brothers, I want you to return me to Shechem. What does that mean, he wants to return to Shechem? What happened in Shechem? Was Shechem the place where Yosef was born? It was the place of seemingly the place of his destruction. It seems like it was the place where he was getting sold into slavery. But Yosef realizes at the end of his life, really earlier, but certainly at the end of his life, with that retrospect, he's able to look back and see that where was the beginning of my fulfilling my purpose in life? Where was the beginning of my kingship, of my greatness? It was because I was sold in Shechem. That darkness, that place of conception, where you can't even see, it didn't even look like redemption. I was sold in Shechem. Eventually I'll come down to Egypt. Eventually, many years later, I'll become the ruler over Egypt. And eventually, I would provide for my family and all the Jewish people. He was able to see within that moment of darkness, the conception. He was able to see afterwards, after the birth, he was able to see the moment of conception. He said, I want you to bring me back to that place of conception. I want to recognize where it all began. I want to be buried in that place, because the burial of the person represents the completion of his mission. I want to recognize that I was able to complete my mission because the mission started there in Shechem. Yosef asks his brothers, he says, I want you to swear to me, make an oath that you're going to bring me out. Why does he ask them to do that? Because that's what an oath is. An oath is, I'm not yet able to fulfill it. I can't do it now. But at some point, I guarantee to you that I will do it later. So the oath is the conception. It's the point, the moment in time where I say, I'm committed to fulfilling that thing. Now it's where it's planted. You don't see it yet because I haven't fulfilled the promise yet. But one day it will be fulfilled. In that oath, Yosef assures his brothers that I don't have anything against you. And the brothers assure Yosef that they don't have anything against him. What's that idea? It also has to do with this, looking at the conception of it, looking at the root of it, looking and recognizing that at that moment, it was a moment of conception. When Yosef was sold, it was a moment of conception. I don't have anything against you. How could Yosef say that? Because he's able to see that that was really Hashem doing it, that it was a moment of conception for what would in the future be his rulership. The brothers were able to look at Yosef and say that they understood that what he had done to them, the challenge that he put them through, was really for their good. It was really Hashem working through Yosef. They were able to see that the challenge, the difficulty, was a hidden thing, so that they would grow and become greater people. That's what they were recognizing in their hashbiyah, in that oath. When Yosef promises that he's going to provide for the Jewish people, he is able to merit. That's again a point of conception. It's a planting of a seed. And later he's able to see the amazing flowering. He travels with the Jewish people in their redemption as they leave Egypt. He travels with them as they become a nation. He's able to see, he planted a seed of providing for them. And that is the concept of achalkel. I can't really get into it really at length right now, but the concept of achalkel is at its root kol, which is this root concept of providing the seed. But he's the one who provides the seed of their ability to exist. And then he's able to see the flowering of that seed as they become a nation, and he travels with them throughout the 40 years. Moshe Rabbeinu is someone who is able to fulfill the promise that the brothers had made to Yosef. He's able to see that he's planting a seed. Yikach mitzvos. What does it mean to grab on the mitzvahs? If a person has a choice between money or fulfilling a commandment, so the natural choice is you see what's in front of you. To recognize that I'm planting a seed here that I'm going to reap the benefits of in the world to come, or on a deeper spiritual level, even within this world itself. That's something that Moshe has the ability to understand in the depth of it. Chacham leiv yikach mitzvos. The one who is wise grabs onto the mitzvah. He sees that he's planting a seed. We ask, why is this verse out of order? Why is the Torah telling us already after the Jewish people have left that Moshe previously took the bones of Yosef? And the answer is because, again, it's teaching us this concept that we see later on in the redemption itself that there was a Pkida, that there was a conception that occurred before. We're looking at the aspect of Yosef, the Pkida, the remembering of Hashem, which we don't see manifest until the actual Exodus, the redemption itself. You only see it in hindsight. And that's the concept of the bones. The bones are that which holds up the human being. The atzmos, the bones are the atzmius, are the essence of the person. But they're invisible. You don't see them. When we speak about Yosef, we speak about his bones, because that's the essence of who he is. It's something which is hidden inside, which hold up the thing, but you don't see it on the outside. It's only something you know about because there's the structure. You can see hints of it, but you don't see it from the outside. You have to figure it out. And it's not a coincidence. That's the Bnei Ephraim. They had that gene. They had the spiritual genes of a Yosef. Yosef was able to see down to conception. He was able to see all the way back in time and recognize that there are stages, even though it doesn't seem like redemption yet, that there are stages of redemption. There's a conception which looks like the opposite. And the children of Ephraim, they used that spiritual gene incorrectly, unfortunately. 30 years prior to when the actual redemption was going to occur, they thought that it was already the time. They thought that even though it wasn't yet, it didn't look like the time, that they made a calculation, that they went back to conception. They said 400 years ago was when the Bris Ben Besarim happened, when God made that covenant with Abraham. So it must be that this is the time. They made that mistake. Why did they make that mistake? Because they had that intuitive ability, which Yosef had. They made a mistake. They misused that intuitive ability. But it was specifically the tribe of Ephraim who came from Yosef, and who ultimately, Mashiach ben Yosef, comes from the tribe of Ephraim. And they also had that aspect of the atzmos. Their bones were laid out. Sadly, it was because they had made a mistake. But the idea, the teaching of Chazal is that they had that spiritual makeup. Their bones were the ability to see that there's already redemption taking place, even though on the surface it doesn't seem that way. But there's already been a conception. There's already been, the beginnings have already started to happen even before the full redemption takes place. They were able to see that. I want to bless you, and please bless me back. Hashem should help us to be zeicha, to merit, to be able to see throughout the challenges of our lives, and also in the redemptions of our lives, how all of the things that have occurred to us were all Hashem bringing us on this path. The challenges themselves were indeed the conception. Hashem should help us to have that view of a Yosef. Now, of course, not to make the mistake of the children of Ephraim, to think that it's come before it's the time, but to always recognize that Hashem was there throughout it all, and that everything is leading up to our ultimate redemption. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos. This podcast was made possible through the gracious donations of listeners like you. For more podcasts like this, please visit www.arigoldwag.com or search on iTunes Ari Goldwag.